What you know, alibis. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Monday, March 31st. Hope you guys are having a good Monday so far. We're going to talk about a case I did a while back, maybe a year and a half or so ago, but there has been a plea deal in the hit and run death of Gavin Knupp. Gavin was 14 years old. I did a backstory on this case. I'm going to link that in the description for those of you that are new to it. It is such a heartbreaking case. Gavin was killed in a hit and run in Ocean Pines, Maryland on July 11th, 2022. Gavin was an outdoor enthusiast who loved hunting, fishing, surfing, and skateboarding. And above everything else, he loved his sister, Summer. They were described as two peas in a pod, inseparable, and he looked to her as his hero. The one thing that has stuck out to me throughout this whole case is how the community in Ocean Pines rallied around this family, loved them, protested with them, and supported them throughout this whole process. What happened the night Gavin was killed? He exited the passenger side of the car he was riding in, which was being driven by his sister, and crossed the street to take a photo after he saw a deer head on a telephone pole. His sister was pulled over in the grass, and as he was going back to get in the car, he was hit. His sister, Summer, did CPR until EMS arrived, and his mother arrived on scene shortly after. She said his body was so damaged he was hardly recognizable. He was pronounced dead a short time later. Now, the car that hit Gavin was found hidden in a garage, and the family who owned that car was a very prominent family in the community. They owned restaurants with the Matt Ort companies, several restaurants across the area. And Gavin's family had a really good idea who was behind the wheel, but investigators had to prove who was behind the wheel. They fingerprinted the car, looked into whether alcohol or speed was a factor, as well as distracted driving, and they did a search warrant for the car. It was a 2011 Mercedes. One person was known to drive this car, and that was Tyler Mailloux. There was no cooperation by the owner of the car, the family, or the driver, and often would plead the fifth when being questioned. So that case had to be built by investigators. Now, the community felt this was a cover up, and many named Tyler months before he was actually arrested. In the time before the arrest, there were numerous protests at all the establishments owned by the Matt Ort companies, with members of the community. Gavin's family and friends would stand outside for hours with signs. Now, get this, the protesters at times were heckled while standing out there seeking justice for Gavin. And homeowners associations in some of the communities banned any yard signs or flags in support of Gavin, while allowing other causes to remain up. It took almost a year to charge Tyler. Some of the charges were failure to immediately stop at the scene of an accident involving bodily injury, knowing the accident may result in serious bodily injury, another for knowing the accident may result in death, failure to immediately return to the scene of an accident involving bodily injury, failure to stop at the scene of an accident involving death, and failing to report the accident to police. Once Tyler was arrested back in August of 2023, a judge threw out the charges since the charges were filed in the wrong venue. 10 months later, the Maryland Court of Appeals overruled the judge and reinstated the charges. But in the meantime, the family for 10 months is wondering, are they going to get justice for Gavin? Fast forward to February 25th of this year, Tyler admitted to driving the car and waived his right to a jury trial. His pretrial release was revoked, and he was handcuffed in court and remanded to the custody of the detention center pending sentencing. That sentencing was set for March 19th at 9:30 a.m. State prosecutors recommended the 10-year sentence with all but 3 years and 227 days suspended. Why did the state recommend such a specific sentence? 1 year for Tyler's failure to remain at the scene, and 1 day for every day Tyler did not come forward and admit his role in the hit and run. And the state argued three main points for sentencing. The first was deterrence. Tyler had an obligation to go to law enforcement. Driving is a privilege and not a right, and that privilege comes with responsibility. A longer sentence would deter Tyler and anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation from leaving the scene. The second point was punishment. The state said that Summer Knupp, who is Gavin's sister, was also a victim. She was left alone and tried to help her brother on the side of the road after Tyler drove off. The state brought up Summer's 911 call where she told operators she didn't want to get out of the car and she was too scared. The state then focused on Tyler's decisions after the accident. He stopped going to work, he changed his phone number, and protected himself since the day of the hit and run. And the third point was rehabilitation. They talked about Tyler's decision making, saying that Tyler felt sympathy and remorse, but only after seeing Gavin's family speak at the hearing on February 25th. And with his deciding to leave the scene, he made bad choices over the course of 2.5 years, while various milestones such as Gavin's birthday, holidays, and family celebrations came and went, while Gavin's family had no answers about what happened to him. Now, Tyler's attorney said back in 2022, the speed limit on Gray's Corner Road was 50 miles an hour with no street lights, no homes or places of business around, and Tyler didn't think anyone would be walking on the road. He said Tyler wasn't speeding when he hit Gavin and said Tyler has a history of hitting deer, and it would be reasonable for him to assume that's what he hit. He said Tyler called his girlfriend, who was driving behind him at the time of the hit and run, and asked if she saw him hit anything, which she said she did not. His attorney also gave a timeline. After hitting Gavin, Tyler parked the car in his family's garage. He saw the damage to his car and went back to the road where it happened. He saw the lights of the first responders, and at that point, he knew it was likely he had hit a person and not a deer. He then woke his dad up and told him he thought he hit a person. His dad immediately started to call attorneys, and one attorney advised them to stay home and not go back to the scene. The next morning, they called their current attorney, who said he immediately called the state attorney, who returned that call later that afternoon. Tyler's attorney claims the accident was reported within 12 hours. He argued that Tyler and his dad were only following the advice of attorneys. His attorney told the judge this was a tragic accident and his client had owned up to it since day one, and that Tyler wasn't responsible for the accident, but did admit Tyler was responsible for not going back to the scene. Circuit Court Judge Brett Wilson agreed with Tyler's attorney. He talked about how both sides were cordial and how sentencing is hard for judges, and also said his 16-year-old son was killed in a car accident as well. The judge also said that the brain is not fully developed until the age of 25 and pointed out Tyler was 22 when it happened. His main focus was making sure Tyler never did something like this again, more than he was focused on punishment. He said Tyler's actions were self-serving, cowardly, and selfish, and acknowledged that had Tyler stopped, it's possible he could have saved Gavin's life by having two people at the scene to render aid. The judge said Tyler's fight or flight response had him flee, and given his age, that was understandable. He praised Tyler's character during the judicial process and noted Tyler's lack of prior offenses. He sentenced Tyler to 10 years with all but 18 months suspended. Family released some statements after the sentencing, and they're obviously disappointed with this slap on the wrist. A family spokesperson said, "We absolutely believe that Tyler was at fault for this accident, and there will be additional accountability coming through a civil lawsuit against Tyler for those actions. We do not concede or agree in any way, shape, or form that somehow the fault of this accident belongs with anybody other than Tyler." The state attorney said there's so much loss and so much grief and so much tragedy in this case and so many of the cases that we handle that we look for justice. We don't consider it to be a victory. I'm sure the Knupp family is heartened by the fact that there is accountability, but certainly nothing is going to make up for the loss of their son. Once Tyler is released, he'll be on probation for 3 years and he will have to serve 400 hours of community service within the first year of his release. His sister Summer made a post on social media with her thoughts about the whole situation. Let's read through that. She said, "It's been almost 3 years since my brother's death, and I've stayed relatively silent about how the criminal case was progressing. But what happened in that courtroom has pushed me too far to remain quiet any longer. First, I want to say that no sentence could ever be enough because ultimately it doesn't bring Gavin back. The court system is corrupt and deeply unfair. Something needs to be done, or at the very least, a light needs to finally shine on what really happens behind closed doors. I've heard stories about people who die because they were hit by a drunk driver, and the driver gets only 15 months in prison, while possession of drugs can result in a 25-year sentence. The Maryland judicial system has failed my family, the families before us, and will continue to fail others unless there's change. In my brother's case, our judge was Brett Wilson, a retired judge from Cambridge who stepped in specifically for my brother's case. Unfortunately, this means no one will have a chance to hold him accountable, and his life will go on without consequence. What he said in the courtroom was what infuriates me the most. Wilson shared a story about his own son who passed away in a single car crash, and then went on to say what happened to Gavin was fate. He experienced the pain of losing a child, yet believes it's just fate. Fate is finding your soulmate or landing a better job opportunity, not the death of a person. Wilson also claimed that this is what Gavin would have wanted. He said, quote, "I'm looking at a picture of Gavin, and all I can see is his smile. I see forgiveness in his smile. I see the kind of person he was. I see he wears a cross necklace, and God is all about forgiveness." Wilson continued, saying he believed this is what Gavin would have wanted. A man who had never met my brother thought he knew what a dead 14-year-old would have wanted. If the roles were reversed and I had been the one killed, Gavin would have wanted Tyler to rot in jail, not be free to go on with his life. Gavin would have wanted us to have that same mentality for him. Judge Wilson didn't know my brother, and he had no right to speak on his behalf. He made an already painful experience even worse. We also felt we weren't fought for as we should have been. We had to sit in silence in the courtroom because we weren't allowed to speak. The people defending us sat in silence too, not because they had to, but because it seemed like they had given up. We were bound by strict rules on what we could and couldn't say per the judge's request. Meanwhile, Tyler's family was treated like royalty. My family had to remain in the courtroom after the sentencing while Tyler's family was escorted out. We all felt as if we were treated like the villains. We weren't allowed to read our impact statements towards Tyler and instead had to read them towards the judge. But his family was allowed to read theirs to us, looking us in the eye. Half of our statements were even crossed out, while Tyler's mom was allowed to look at my mom in the eye and say, "Mother to mother." Nothing about yesterday was fair, nor was it what I expected. I wish with all my heart I could go back and change the events that crushed our family. Bless her heart. Can't imagine. Gavin's sister has chosen to honor her brother's memory by doing things Gavin loved. For example, she entered a deep sea fishing catch and release tournament in Gavin's honor. And she told Delmarva Life, Gavin loved fishing. One thing he didn't get to do was go deep sea fishing. So I wanted to accomplish the one thing he didn't get to do. It was an all-girls tournament, so it was perfect. Something I could win and also do for him. After the tournament, I went to go text him that I won. But I know he was there with me the entire time. I know he definitely helped me bring the fish in. People fight marlins for an hour or so usually, and I brought my first one in 6 minutes and the second in 8 minutes. I definitely believe he was there helping me bring the fish in. Gavin was a very joyful person. He was one of the funniest people I know. Every time he would walk into a room, he would light up. He cared more about others than about himself. He was always on the go, ready to do something or help someone and try to make everyone laugh. We were definitely best friends. No siblings I know were as close as me and Gavin. I took him everywhere because I just got my license. I picked him up and I dropped everything for that kid. His dad, Ray, said, "When I think about him, I think full throttle. He only had one speed, and it was go, go, go. And everything he did with heart, fishing and surfing. He did it until he perfected it." Earlier in the case, his mother, Tiffany, told WBOC, "It's minute to minute. You wake up every day and you lose him all over again. He made us laugh all the time and just the stupid stuff that you miss every second. And the laughter was out of this house pretty fast. That was the overwhelming part. It's the silence that gets you." I tell you, it's a tough case. I'm wearing my Justice for Gavin shirt, and this kid had the best smile. Every photo I've seen, you can tell he was just living his best life, loving every second of being a very young and athletic kid. There have been a lot of comments in the Justice for Gavin group that they feel this is part of the good old boys system, and with the families pull in the community, that Tyler got a deal the average person wouldn't have got. What a loss with that young man. My heart goes out to their beautiful family, and I hope that they find whatever peace they can to try and move forward. But we all know these kind of losses are never resolved in your heart or your head, and life is never the same. So send some good juju their way, some uplifting thoughts, prayers, whatever you do. If anything changes on this case or there's any new developments, I will definitely let you know. But that is it for now. Hope you guys have a good rest of your afternoon, and we will see you soon.